This is Glenn Pendlay, and welcome to the Weightlifting Scoop podcast.
So we got a funny guy here. His name's Jared Fleming, a 94-kilo national champ. And we're going to have a little joke contest to start this off. Started off with a bang. Jared's got a funny joke that he wants you guys to hear. We haven't heard it yet, so.
All right, well, the guy goes into this.
You got to get up to the mic, man.
All right, my bad here. All right, so a guy goes into the store to buy some condoms, and the cashier says, "Hey, do you want a bag?" The guy says, "No, the girl's not that ugly."
That was okay.
That was all right. I wouldn't put it on the top tier.
Well, I got a joke. I guess we're gonna go around the table a little bit. We got me, Glenn, and Jared here. So have you guys ever had sex while camping? It's fucking intense. It's a play on words, asshole.
Oh, I just got it.
Okay, good job,
Took me a second.
That was a good one.
Took me a second. That was pretty good.
All right, so I don't know if you guys out there like that one, but let's hear Glenn's.
You know, Travis, I always tell long jokes, so this one's a little bit longer than that. So there's an old cowboy, and he's blind. He's like walking downtown to go to a bar, and actually, he hears music and everything, but what he doesn't realize is it's a lesbian bar. So he goes in, he thinks it's a bar. He walks in, takes a seat, and there's people all around him, and, you know, he can hear everybody laughing and talking, and so all of a sudden he kind of yells out, "Hey, you guys want to hear a blonde joke?" And there's just dead silence in the room. Dead silence. And the girl that was sitting to his right, she says, well, the bartender is a blonde girl. She's a big girl, and she's got a bat in her hand right now. I am a pretty big girl. I played judo in college. I'm about 6 foot tall. I'm about 220 pounds.
That's a big bitch.
That's a big girl. The girl to the left of you is like a professional bodybuilder. She goes about 220. And there's a girl behind you, and she's the biggest one of all of us. She's a stunt woman for TV, and she's about 6'4". She's a blonde too. We're all blondes. Now, are you really sure that you still want to tell a blonde joke? And the guy kind of looks at me and says, "No, I guess not. I really don't want to have to explain myself 4 different times."
Oh, God.
So that was my joke.
I don't know. That took a long time. I don't know if it had the most bang for the buck.
That was one of the shortest jokes I've ever told in my life, Travis.
Yeah. I don't know. Tell us what you think. Tweet us your jokes. The winner will be on the next podcast. So, like we said, we got Jared Fleming here.
Everybody agrees that I won.
Sure,
okay.
Glenn. Yeah, you can have that one. Good. Let's go on.
Thank you, Jared.
You won longest joke.
And best joke.
Anyways, Jared started out young. He started out when he was 10 years old. So do you think that was so starting out that young, do you think that was like a huge advantage for you becoming as good as you are now?
Well, I would definitely say it was a big advantage. I think all the years of getting extra experience as far as, you know, a lot of people like Chad Vaughn and yourself, Travis, started, you know, I think, 16 was it when you started?
Yeah, 16.
So I would say that just the extra years of experience and becoming familiar with the snatch and clean and jerk, I would say is definitely beneficial. You know, getting comfortable moving, you know, doing those movements at a young age, I would definitely say is a big advantage. So I would definitely say that it was a big advantage growing up for sure.
So growing up, did you compete? You competed in the school age and the junior ranks, right?
Yep. Yeah. So when I was young, you know, like I said, I started at 10 years old. So I started out doing the school age events, and then as I got older, around 13, 14, I was qualifying for both the school age and junior events. So I did get a lot of experience at a young age doing the Olympic lifts. But also the other thing too, when I was young, is I didn't ever switch over to weightlifting, you know, exclusively until I was in college. So I feel like it was very important doing, you know, soccer, football, wrestling, track. I think, you know, it was important, you know, it was very, you know, beneficial to start at a young age, but I think the biggest thing is the general athletics at a young age. So sticking with all the other sports, I think was also very important, and then just getting more specific as I got to college.
So do you think if you had dropped some of the other sports that you'd be really burnt out on weightlifting now?
Yeah, I feel like that's what would happen if I started real young and only did Olympic weightlifting. I think that I would have probably been burned out, at that age. You have a lot of interest in things like that. I think just being, exclusively, weightlifter or, football player, I know I grew up doing wrestling. And I know a lot of kids who are really talented that got burned out from wrestling at a young age. So they never reached their full potential. I think if just doing weightlifting at a young age, I may have, been burned out and never reached where I am now.
I'm kind of interested to know, like, I have coached my share of kids that did weightlifting on top of football or baseball or not so many wrestling, just because where I lived at that time. Wrestling's not a huge deal in Texas, but I've seen a lot of people taken away from weightlifting by other sports. They in 7th or 8th grade, they're doing weightlifting, and then by the time they're, a sophomore or something, they're really good at football, and so they end up concentrating more on football, going and trying to get a scholarship, whatever, and those other sports take them out of weightlifting. Why did that not happen to you, do you think?
Well, I think that also ties into the culture of the area that you're from. I mean, Texas, football is religion. And so everybody, growing up, football is kind of, is religion. That's what they do. So I think growing up in New York, football wasn't as big of a deal as like it was in Texas. I mean, so we didn't, there was no culture as far as sports. I mean, football was, it was big, but it was nothing like it is in Texas. So I knew kids that wrestled, kids that played soccer, baseball, but no one sport was huge growing up. So I think that, if I grew up in Texas where all the glory and fame was in football, I probably would have stuck with football. But just because there was no real, local fame for being a football player or a baseball player, I think that when I realized I was, really good at weightlifting and I was winning junior Olympics and school age nationals and junior nationals and things like that, I got more personal glory from being good at weightlifting, so I stuck with that.
Which other sport did you like the best?
I mean, I would think that I would say I liked wrestling the best besides weightlifting. I really just enjoyed the personal satisfaction of being on top. I know that a lot of,
and there goes Jared with the jokes again.
Oh goodness. But I mean, just, I really like to, oh God. Well, now you guys know me. So
introducing Jared Fleming.
Oh boy. But no, I just, you couldn't blame you couldn't pass the blame on anybody else if you didn't win a game, soccer or football. There was a lot of other, people, to share the success of the blame, and sharing success wasn't a problem. But, when it comes to weightlifting or wrestling, it's all on you, and, you can't blame anybody else for your downfalls. But then at the same time, you really get to be on the up with your success. So I think, just the one-on-one sports, I think, were really more suited for me.
Oh, not that what I think really matters here, but I thought the same thing about sports when I was a kid, and I liked individual sports and didn't so much like team sports. It's interesting. Do you think, I think there's a real different mindset to people that really like individual sports and to people that really get into team sports. Do you think that you were a little unusual in that the individual sports really satisfied you more, or do you see other kids have the same mindset?
I just think everybody just has what they enjoy. I don't think it would be, one person's unusual or the other. I just think it's just a personal preference, whether it is, you like to be the center of attention or if you like to be mixed in with a group. I think some people like to, whereas for wrestling or weightlifting or, maybe even swimming, you're the only one out there. You're kind of the spotlight. There's no, you can't be mixed into like the crowd of a team. If you're out on a football field, you have X number of players out there with you. You're not the spotlight.
X would equal 22 in that case.
22. X being 22 in this math equation of football.
Well, aren't there 11 people on a team on the field?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't know that if you played football. I never played football, so I shouldn't really know that. But Travis is going to write me a note here and say, no,
there's
12.
11. There's 11 people on the field in football. So Caleb Whitby has 9 brothers and sisters and a mom and dad, obviously.
So they could field a football team with their family.
They could field a football team with his family.
With one backup.
They had to drive a bus. That's awesome.
That is actually not pertinent, but it actually is funny.
We really had that many people in his family?
Not relevant to the conversation. But.
Well, when we drove a 15-person van up to Nationals, Kayla was like, "Yeah, that's what we drove when I was little."
Remind
because
him of,
their family has 12 people in it, so they all wanted to go somewhere. It's not like they
11.
11. If they all wanted to go somewhere, it's not like they could go in a car. You can't fit 11 people in any car that I know of. Unless they're very small people. Maybe 11 Mike Zellas, but not 11 Jared Flemings.
Well, anyways, have you ever gone through, I mean, obviously being in the sport so long, you've gone through the ups and downs. I mean, have you ever been burnt out where you're like, I hate weightlifting, why am I still sticking with it? And how'd you get through those times? Because everyone out there goes through those periods of times, and being that you've been in the sport long enough, you've probably figured out, how to fight through them.
I mean, I think the big thing when I was young, my father was my coach growing up, and I think the biggest thing was he didn't want me to become burned out. So I only trained 3 days a week all through high school. So I didn't really train enough to ever become burned out. I would say once I got to college and started training 5 times a week down with, Kendrick and Kyle Pierce, it still wasn't enough to become really burned out. But when I went out to the training center in 2011 and was training 9 times a week, I really saw what it was like to be burned out, and then to keep training when you really didn't want to, just because you were in a program where taking a break really wasn't an option. That was your job and you had to train. So I think that depending on the program you're at, I feel like it depends on the program you're on. So training 3 times a week, you're not going to be burned out as much, and also having my dad as my coach, it was easier to say, Dad, I'm kind of burned out, I don't really want to train. But so when I was at the training center and I was really burned out, I mean, the biggest thing for me was just being very honest and open with my coach and letting him know exactly how I felt, told him, mentally, physically how I felt. And, as long as I was mentally, felt okay with training, physically everything was pretty good. And then, whenever, when you become burned out, I think it's really important to make sure you take breaks too. I think that just trying to push through, if you're mentally just not into it, I think trying to push through that's just, counterproductive. I think that the big thing is, take a week off. Obviously you can't do that if you're leading up to a big competition like World Championships and you're burned out. Well, you kind of got to stick it through. I think you have to know when it's appropriate to take a break and when it's not. But I think taking breaks and giving your mind and body time to rest is really important. So that for me, after Pan Am's, I was burned out. I've been out at the training center. Pan Am's didn't go how I wanted it, so I took a couple 2-3 weeks off and just cleared my mind and my head. And now I'm hungry and ready to come back and train for World. So I think taking breaks when it's appropriate is really important as far as keeping from being burned out.
It's interesting that you mentioned you just trained 3 times all the way through high school, because I've always been a big believer. I don't know if I would say all the way through high school, but certainly when I coached a lot of younger kids, that was what we did. Even when they wanted to do more, to stick with 3, just because, a kid could say, I want to train every day, but after 2 weeks of it, they're like, I don't want to be here anymore. So just kind of keep people down at 3 weeks for at least some amount of time, a few years, something when they first start, is a real smart thing to do. So I think it was probably exactly the right call for your dad.
Yeah, and I mean, and growing up, there's a lot of other coaches telling my dad and I that, there's no way he can only be training 3 days a week and doing what he's doing. He definitely needs to be training 5 times a week. And I think that was one thing I really prided my dad on, was doing what he felt was right and sticking with his guns and doing 3 times a week, because, who knows what would have happened if I'd have switched to that 5 times a week and doing kind of what everybody else said was what you need to be doing. And so I think that, sticking to his guns, that was a really good thing to do. And, whether or not I needed to stick with 3 times a week all the way through high school, who's to say? But I mean, it really did give me, a lot to improve on. When I did go to college and went from 3 days a week to 5 days a week, it's like only training 3 days a week, we knew that there was a lot of room for improvement, because once I was ready to start training more times a week, obviously there would be a huge, progression to what I was doing. So, and I saw that when I first went to college, within a year I put 33 kilograms on my, on my total. And so I think that, going from training 3 days a week to 5 days a week, when the time came, I saw that huge jump just from, simply training more.
So, Glenn, do you think that you should optimize your total training less times a week before you move on to more training?
I'm not really of that opinion, no. I think there's a point in a young lifter's career that they really buy into the sport. That at that point they have really strong goals. And I think if you push somebody before that, you can drive them out of the sport. But I think that you can kind of see that as if you're their friend, if you're their coach, if their parents, whatever, there comes a time when weightlifting it was just another activity. And then if the lifter is going to end up being a really good lifter, there comes a point when they have really bought in, and that is a major goal of their life, and they're getting a lot of their self-esteem from it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I would tend to think that at that point you can start upping the training. And I don't know, I think that it probably comes at a different point for everybody. I know that, I've talked about one of the lifters that I started really young, not as young as Jared at 12. But, that I, increased from 3 to 4 days a week when he was, like 14, and increased to 5 days a week when he was like, 15, 16. Then he stayed at 5 until he finished high school. But, the point at which he upped his training a little was the point at which he was talking about dedicating his life to weightlifting and wanting to go to the Olympics and wanting to do whatever it took, even if he had to delay college. And, he was thinking about things like that. He was totally bought into weightlifting. That was the major thing in his life. And so I think that was the right thing to do to up the training a little bit. I'm sure that depending on the person, that can come at different stages. And, who knows, for Jared, it might have been the perfect thing to wait until after high school. But I do think there's a lot of people that could probably make that jump, while in high school. But I'm sure that every situation's different.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. I think the biggest reason, wasn't just, mentally being burned out. I think that was a big part of it, being younger. But the other thing too was, my dad thought it was really important to become an athlete before specifying and becoming just a weightlifter. So, like I said, doing other sports like wrestling and football and soccer and things while I was in high school, as well as track and field. The focus wasn't just on being, the best weightlifter I could be at the time. It was being the best athlete I could be at the time. And then as I got a little older, becoming more specific. So I think it really just depends on what your priority at that time is. If your priority is being the best weightlifter at that time, then yeah, I think, starting to train 5 times a week a little earlier would be what you would need to do, because you're not going to become the best weightlifter that you're capable of being training 3 times a week. That's not possible.
So, I mean, that's a good point, is that you weren't basically sitting on the couch eating potato chips the other 4 days of the week. You were playing other sports. You were doing athletic things outside of weightlifting. And were you lifting weights at school for, like, football? Were you doing any kind of squatting or anything like that outside of your weightlifting specific training?
No, I mean, when I was in high school, my football coaches would tell me, we want you to come in and we want you to do the workout with a team. And my dad was kind of opposed to that. He was like, we're doing our program. It's working for him. He can squat, bench, deadlift, clean, snatch more than anybody on the team. Why would we have him do your program when he's already doing his own? That would just take away from what we're doing. So they wanted me to do that, and my dad was willing to go in there and help the coaches with a program, because obviously what we were doing was very successful, but, they small town coach, they weren't really interested in what anybody else was doing. They kind of, had their own agenda. And so we just stuck with what we were doing, and it seemed to be working. So I pretty much just did, our program, and then whatever we had to do on the field and whatnot I did. But outside of that, in the weight room, we did our own program.
So I think one of the main takeaways that I'm getting from this is it's better to do a sustainable program. So you trained from the time you were 10, you said?
Yeah.
So 10 until 18, 3 days a week. So, and like, with little time off. So basically, training for 8 years, regardless of 3-5 times a week, that's better than a kid training 5 times a week for like a month and then quitting for a month, and then, so stick with something that you can consistently do. And also, like, is a kid going to be that much better if they're training 9 times a week? Not really. They're going to see big improvement in the beginning, so keep them injury-free, keep them interested in the sport, and let them do other things to develop their athletic potential.
Well, that is someone going to be way better training 5, 6, 9 times a week. That's something that I've tried to emphasize at seminars and things, is that a lot of people see our program, and when we kind of delve into what we do, they look at it as, that's what we should do. If I want to be the best, that's what I should do. And, it really takes a fairly specialized lifestyle and somebody who's ready for it to benefit from, a full-on, full-time program. And I think that probably, 3 times a week can get you 80% or 90% of the way there. All that extra work is only good for the last, 5% or something. And so, 3 days a week, you can't knock it for people other than folks that are training full-time for weightlifting, no job, taking naps in the afternoon, et cetera, et cetera. It's really not appropriate. And I think some people, sometimes people need to be reminded of that you can't just walk in and copy with success what someone who's a full-time weightlifter is doing.
Real quick, what are your goals over the next year or so? So me and you are both training for Worlds. You know, what are your plans for that, and after that, after you graduate college and all?
Well, you know, a little more short term as far as leading up to World Championships. You know, I start out my program here this coming Monday. You know, the plan for World Championships, I mean, I know this isn't a qualification year for the Olympics, so, you know, a little more just to kind of feel it out, but the plan is to go in and hit some pretty good PRs. You know, things have been going really good in training. It's just time to really put everything together. So I'd like to hit some good solid PRs here at World Championships, and then, you know, I'm getting down to the wire as far as graduating college. I think college hasn't really taken too much away from my training. You know, we have the way the program's set up down there at LSUS it works pretty well around school, but I am looking forward to graduating and being able to focus the next, 2.5 years leading up to the Olympics. After I graduate, just focusing solely on weightlifting and doing everything I can to make that Olympic team and, hopefully, be in any contention for getting a medal. So, right now it's just train for World Championships, get through college, and then as soon as I'm done, as soon as I've graduated, really kind of reevaluate where things are at in my life and determine where is best for my weightlifting career, whether it's, maybe here at Muscle Driver at the Olympic Training Center or staying down there at LSUS, just, reevaluate as soon as I graduate and figure out what's going to be best for training and getting on that Olympic team and hopefully shooting for a medal.
That's a plan.
Yeah, so anyways, it was good to have you, Jared. Out there, if you're listening, tell us, tweet us your jokes at WLiftingScoop. Email us. You can email them at theweightliftingscoop@gmail.com. And anything, Glenn?
Go buy a Pendlay bar. They're absolutely awesome.
You got anything, Jared?
Same thing, Pendlay. That's the way to go.
Oh, man.
Or Works on Relico.
All right, you're out.